Welcome to LogisticsSales.com, where today we'll be discussing negotiating mutually beneficial terms. So stick around and let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of LogisticsSales.com, where today we're discussing negotiating mutually beneficial terms. I'm your host, Dean, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Damon.
Hello.
And Gail.
Hi, guys.
So we briefly touched on this topic last week while we were talking about creating a value proposition, but today we're going to do a deeper dive in negotiating mutually beneficial terms and what that means. In a nutshell, really, you and your customer should feel like you've gained something when you walked away from the deal. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Damon, and we're going to talk about identifying your value proposition.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, for sure. We are definitely going to dive in a little bit deeper in this. Last time we were talking more about the value proposition of what can we bring to the table? How can we make ourselves more valuable? How can we show people the value in what we're doing? And getting people to pay for that value, right? So the value proposition, we want to dig a little bit deeper into this. Again, mutually beneficial. So how is it going to benefit the other person as well as ourselves? And so what we want to really do is get into a really clear objective and have a proposal ready. And I know last episode I talked about the example of trying to get a raise from your employer, right? So, if you're not clear with your objective, you're going to walk into a situation and it's going to go something like this where, hey, I'm looking for a raise. I can't really afford things nowadays, and I just really need more money. And can I get that raise? Inflation's really high. And for your employer, they kind of scratch their heads and say, well, costs have gone up everywhere. How are we supposed to give you a raise, right? So becoming mutually beneficial is really understanding the other side and really kind of having your points together, have something to offer. And we talked about this as well, as like, have something to offer, be clear and concise with your numbers, right? Be clear and concise with your research, be clear and concise with any information, bring the information to the table. Right? When you have information, the conversation is going to be a lot different. Walking into a place where you can tell your employer, like, hey, over the last year, this is what I've been able to accomplish. This is what I've been able to do. This is how I've been working in the organization. Here's what I did maybe the year before, and here's my progress for the next, the last 12 months that I've been here. And really putting in a case together to show the employer, like, hey, this is how my activity has created these outcomes for the company, and hopefully be able to demonstrate that level of profitability that you've been able to bring to the company, or the amount that you've been able to save, whether it's through charts, whether it's through percentages, whether you're able to show gross incomes for your specific team, right? But have specific examples that you can bring to a table that the employer would really understand and want. And, if the employer can see that value in you, now he's more than happy to say, hey, well, you've just made me like an extra $1 million for my business. Yeah, sure, I can put a little portion of that back into you, right? So when employers can see what those results look like, it's a lot easier for them to take action and say, well, yeah, I see the value in there. Let me help you out. And
I was just going to say, it's really interesting because as you're saying this, I'm picturing the actual scenario and watching it play out. And really what you're discussing is, credibility. You want to come across credible. You want to show you've done your homework. So when you're going in to talk to your customer, you want to do that same thing. You want to come in with the information they want to hear and they need to hear. And you're credible enough that they want to do business with you, just like in your scenario where you come across to your employer that you're so credible and worthy of this, increase in pay, and you've given reasons why. So I love that example.
For sure. And the more examples that you have of that personal experience, of success stories that you're able to create just by, observation of what have you done over the last 12 months? And that should be a question that you should have for yourself. Like, well, what have I done over the last 30 days? What have I done in the last 90 days? What have I done, any quarter? But be able to start observing yourself and say, okay, where do I want to get to? Right? And keep raising the bar. There's opportunities that are all around us, and to find mutually beneficial terms is very easy to do. And we talked about this example just off camera the other day, and maybe we can put up the slide for this this company that's for sale, right? And there's a friend of yours, Gail, that you were saying, this person is getting married soon, and they looked at wedding venues, and for like 75 people, there was a wedding venue that cost $20,000. Just for the bare basics, and we're like, everything's gone up in price, but how do we justify paying $20,000 versus investing that into something else? And I said, well, hold on, like, why do we need to really put that much emphasis on $20,000? How hard is it to create value to get someone to pay you $20,000 to have an event like this? And so I just gave her a bunch of examples, and we looked up just on a quick Google search, and let's look for different businesses that are for sale, right? So we looked at a bunch of different businesses. This is one that we pulled up, and I said, okay, well, let's try to understand, both parties here, right? So obviously the company is selling their business, right? And there was over 700 companies that, came up in the search. So anything you can relate yourself to, try to see, okay, which one can I understand? Do it as a test project at home, and just say, okay, well, which ones do I have a little bit of knowledge about? Which ones can I research about? And how can I make this practical for myself, right? And so, when I looked at this one, I said, okay, and this was like on the first page, right? So I said, here's a quick example. These guys look like they're having fun in the photo here. So let's take a look at this, right? They have some information, right? They have an asking price. They have the annual revenue of what they're doing. There's a cash flow in there, which is probably how much they're generating per year. And I said, okay, well, let's try to understand it. There's 3 people in the photo. There's 3 vehicles behind them. They're offering luxury wine tour experiences in Kelowna, which is known for their wineries. And I'm like, okay, it's a luxury experience. They're probably using, 3 vehicles, which they have payments on, which they're taking loans on for. They need drivers for those vehicles. And so maybe these 3 gentlemen and the lady there are the ones providing the service. And so when you look and you say, okay, well, if their cash flow is only 100 to 250K, what are they possibly making a year? And if they're all owners in the business, how much is that really worthwhile for them to be carrying this business cost on? And maybe it's not producing what they want, but they had fun doing the business, and now they're looking to sell. So I'm really trying to understand, like, what is their selling proposition to? Why are they selling it? I'm not really looking at it as in, oh, I'm going to gain a business, but I'm also going to ask the question, why are they selling? And so I'm like, okay, all right, even if I don't want to buy this business myself and I want to help somebody else buy this business, now I can start using my expertise to start understanding and analyzing the business. And so when I look at the asking price, I go, okay, who likely is going to pay $500,000 to $1 million a year for this business, right? So right away, I'm like, how long is it going to take me to make back that money? And I go, okay, if that's going to take about a 3 to 5 year term to pay me back that money, is it really worth it for me or for anybody else? Probably not, right? That's too long for this type of business. If it was something where it required less labor and the owners didn't have to be involved, I would say, sure, yeah, maybe I can make an investment in here. But again, I'm not going to see that money for about 5 years. And so right away I say, okay, the asking price is too high. All right, so what would I negotiate it down to? Maybe 2 years of service, right? So 2 years of their net revenue cash flows of what they were earning. So I would negotiate that price down to, depending on what they were earning, but I would just take a look at their last 2 years and say, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll pay you a 2x multiple on your current earnings. And so then I would say, okay, well, revenue, I would take a look at the revenue and take a look at their expenses and say, okay, what are they doing right now for online marketing, or how are they obtaining their customers? How are they doing this? And so I would also take a look and say, okay, well, how is the business going for year to year? Is it increasing in revenues? Is it having peaks and then going down? But these are all tips that I'll be able to negotiate with the client on. And also for whoever the buyer is going to be, I'm going to try to negotiate as well and say, okay, well, here's the opportunities, or here's where they've actually saturated the market already, and different competitors might be coming into the space. So maybe we want to start considering, okay, well, the revenue dipped last year. Why did it dip? Is there more competitors? Are more people starting to do this? Is it just not appealing anymore? Is there just not enough population to maybe support ongoing revenues? Maybe it's a one-time thing that people did and now they're getting bored of it. But I'm using all that information and all that data to start saving the buyer money. And so, right away, if And if the price that I'm asking for is $20,000 for my fee to help a customer buy this business, I'm gonna show the value. I'm gonna show the value in, the asking price right away. From $500,000, I'm gonna reduce this down to maybe 250. So if I could tell the customer, like, or the buyer, like, hey, I could save you $250,000 right off the asking price. Yeah, you know what? He's gonna be like, oh wow, okay, yeah, maybe paying $20,000 to you is not a problem, right? Then I'm gonna be able to give him expertise advice on the actual business by whether I do Google searches and just start finding information about what is the tourism industry all about. So I'm starting to study the industry, study how it works, study the geographic location, see how many potential people are coming into this area all the time for tourism. And then I'm studying the cash flow needs, right? And so I say, okay, well, what does that seller really want? And if it's just like for them to get out of the business, for someone to take over all the payments that they may have, then I may just say, okay, well, they're just really trying to get out of this business because they don't want to take on the debt anymore. And they don't really see a potential for them to earn the high salaries that they want as individuals. So yeah, let's just understand their pain points and give them a solution for that. And if we talk to them in the way that they want, then we could potentially show them that maybe the business isn't worth as much, and create a great deal for that buyer. Now, vice versa, if I want to represent the sellers in this situation, I'd have a real sit down with them too, and get to negotiate those terms as well, and just say, okay, well, here, let's get to some reasonable pricing on this. Let me give you my expertise, and if I help you sell this business, hey, maybe I can make that 20 grand commission as well. But there's so many ways to do this, and again, encourage anyone. There's so many potential areas where we could use any expertise that we have to be able to help somebody either buying or selling something. And just, again, I've done this for years and years, and just be the middleman and negotiate terms that are beneficial.
Yeah, I would just say it's really important. Like what we just saw Damon doing right there was going into a business he knew nothing about, taking in all of that information and figuring out how to conceptualize it into a value proposition that could then go move forward into a negotiation, right? He looked at it and he said, okay, I have to do some research about who this company is, about the target demographic, about the area, and then expanding off of that about what are some of the pain points that they are most likely experiencing. And all of that we just heard Damon say, he's never sat on the phone with any of these people. He doesn't know 100% for sure if that specific, point is something that they are maybe dealing with or is a pain point for their business. But he can take those clues just based off of the organization, based off the information that's provided, and start to kind of fit the puzzle pieces together. We may not have the entire picture, but it's going to give us enough of a background to then go into those conversations and into those negotiations with a level head, with an idea, and most importantly, a game plan and a map of how we're going to get to that end result or that end deal.
Yeah, I think a lot of our audience, I refer to like my trucking experience, and I've brokered deals in the trucking industry where we've been able to buy companies for $0, essentially, right? Just understanding, okay, well, if they have equipment like the vans that we saw in that slide, there's a people want value for those vehicles, right? So that's typically what a trucking company wants, is like, how do I sell my trucks and trailers? And pretty much, if you want to get them for $0, is you could have somebody come in as to finance it, refinance. So the money doesn't come out of your pocket, but you could be refinanced by a loan specialist that just says, okay, here's the equipment value, this is what we can offer you for it. And if your credit is good enough, or you can leverage some sort of credit from somewhere, they'll give it to you for $0 down and just create a payment plan that you can work with. And if the business can suffice that payment plan, then you're good to go. But having that little bit of experience or a little bit of knowledge that even when you buy a business, there's a disclosure for that business to really see like the business can do what it say it can do. So you're not going to go blind into a situation, but just that understanding that you'll be provided with financial statements, you'll be provided with some sort of operating revenues or some information about how that business does operate. But there's obviously some sort of disclosure that does happen. So just knowing some of these steps and being able to visualize it and saying, okay, is this something that I can do, or can I make it practical? And that's what you always want to do, is take any simple or any complex situation and how to simplify it, just by saying, okay, well, is it only a 1-2 step process? Yeah, I could probably figure this out. And just having that confidence to go ahead and do it, but to understand both parties at the same time.
And I think that's going to lead us right into the next section of this episode, which is basically going in and embracing a shared identity or a goal. When you are working on these negotiations, you have to have that same objective, that same goal in mind. Otherwise, it's really hard to reach that middle ground where you guys can both walk away from that table going, I closed that deal and I'm happy with it and I got what I needed from it from the other party. So you have to have that shared identity or goal. And one of the first ways that you're going to do that is discuss the overarching goal you share with the members or the coworkers or whoever it is if you're working on the interemployment area, and figure out where that middle ground is. What do you both want out of this interaction? What do you both want from this deal? When you have that done, you want to focus on the same outcome. How do you want the negotiation to end? When you are done at the table, there's always going to be certain things that you can't negotiate on and that you can. So having an understanding of what success looks like in both terms is going to give you an idea of how to make sure that you're meeting the goals of the other person on the other end of the table, but also making sure that your own goals are met, because you can't win a negotiation if you're sacrificing everything on your end. But you also can't win a negotiation if they're sacrificing everything as well. It has to be mutually beneficial. Number one.
Yeah, great point, Gail. There's nothing better too when you're sitting down with your customer, when you have a shared identity or goal, you bring that collaboration together that much more. You want to show them that you're willing and prepared to work as a team with them to see them succeed.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. And then just to give you guys another example here, because I think they help paint a picture that makes it a little bit easier to understand. From the logistics space, let's imagine that you as a logistics provider are working with a potential manufacturer that wants to do business with you guys as a transportation provider. So let's say that the issue that they're experiencing, the pain point that they have, is improving delivery speeds for their end receiver, their end customer. They want to make sure that their products make it to the shelves on time. Maybe they have deadlines and specific requirements that have to be met. And so by sharing some of your data and going through your scheduling and prioritizing what's most important to them when it comes to that negotiation, then you can work to achieve that mutual goal, and you can work to achieve that middle ground where they're like, okay, I'm happy because I understand that you know what I need, and that's your priority. And it really does come into building that relationship and to building a solution that both people can be happy with. And, with this specific example, over time, it's going to lead to fewer delays in transit. It's going to lead to stronger relationships between you and that partner. It's going to build that company's brand because they're going to know, oh, that product's always going to be on the store shelves because they get delivered on time. So there's a lot of benefits that start to roll into that. And if you can conceptualize and vocalize that in the negotiations, you start to paint the picture for the actual manufacturer or the customer, and they go, oh yeah, you're right. If I can get these there on time, it's going to look good for my customers, and that means we're going to have more sales, which means more production and then more revenue. So it starts to paint a picture that gives you that edge in that negotiation.
Yeah. And another really important step in negotiating mutually beneficial terms is not just distinguishing, but understanding that there's going to be some obstacles and some challenges, but any obstacle or challenge can be overcome. Again, we're talking, and we talk a lot about coming from a place of service, and when you're sitting down and you want to, mutually negotiate a term with your customer, you have an end goal. Of course, you have your needs and your wants, and so do they, but there has to be give and take. A better word for it is a compromise. And a really part of this process, it's showing that the compromise and the negotiation really sets the tone for the entire negotiation and the entire relationship. We've already talked about, once you've found that ideal client and you've done your value proposition and you've actually gotten to this step, it's just the beginning. Even after you sign the contract, you're in the trenches, you're doing the work with them. So this part of the process is so key because they're going to see, are you willing to compromise? Are you willing to understand their needs and while addressing their pain points? And truthfully, a good partner is going to understand the needs and wants of yours as well. So you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And, one thing to kind of keep in mind too is I know a lot of times is when you're dealing with a bigger client, and there's a bigger outcome that's involved, there's going to be more obstacles because typically there's more people involved in that process. So understanding each of the people and the sections that you have to go through to be able to please everybody, to get everyone on board to make a decision, the obstacles are going to be there. But when you're dealing with smaller to medium-sized companies, sometimes you're only having to convince one person, and so the obstacles become a lot less. So depending on the scenario that you're in, really think the situation out thoroughly and understand, okay, who's really involved. And I hate going back to this example, but it's when you go into your supervisor or your boss for that raise, it may not just be that one person that's going to make that decision. Like they may have superiors or even sometimes shareholders that they have to try to convince to make these things really happen, right? To get that raise and to really move it to that next level and convince somebody. There's sometimes multiple steps involved. And so, yeah, people have budgets, people have different situations that they have to deal with. But again, if you can understand and try to get really into a deep dive into everything that's happening, you'll be able to figure it out and provide the right solutions to make it beneficial for all parties involved.
Yeah, great points, Damon. And we talked about these obstacles and what that compromise means in order to get the deal done. And I think of a few examples offhand, because in business, it's always operating expenses versus revenues, and price always comes down to a sticking point. And there's ways to address this without them being deal breakers. I think right away with the major grocery chains here in Canada, we have, on the shelves, they've got the brand names, but most of the major grocery chains in Canada offer their own no-name brand to help the customers that are maybe talking about price point being an issue for them while they're shopping. In logistics, you can talk about, transportation cost issues. Sometimes price is the sticking point. So you come up with other, options. Some companies might look at moving their product by rail rather than by road. Sometimes if you're negotiating with a customer and this is a sticking point, you offer flexibility in pickup and delivery times. You can also look at loading and unloading times where you can have a cost to reduce that base cost for them, but then you say, look, the first 2 hours are free, and after that, here's the cost for the wait times for drivers. So it also provides the customer incentive to keep things moving, understanding that just like their pain points, one of the pain points for the transportation company might be having their drivers sit and having to pay them. And if they know it's going to cost me money to have that, that vehicle and that trailer sitting, maybe I can do some internal things to make sure that these trailers are getting loaded so we're not having to pay more.
Yeah, and I would say there's also the added value that you can provide as well. Like if price is a sticking point and they're not willing to budge on it, what can you offer them for that price and then add additional value to it that's going to make them say, okay, you know what, this price matches with what I'm willing to pay, and I'm going to get this bonus on the side. Like, that's great. I'm totally down to go ahead and book your service or to buy your product. We see that with cell phone companies all the time. How often do they have these promotions where their prices really don't change, but they're like, get an extra 10 gigs of data for limited time only. We see it all the time in common day marketing because it's a very powerful tool, is to be able to say, hey, here's our standard price. We can't really do anything. It's got to be what it's got to be, but we're going to add this on top of it. And we're going to add this value. Maybe it's a dedicated customer service rep. Maybe it's 24-hour live tracking for transportation. There's so many different things that you can build on top of it to make it worth that price. So price should never really be a sticking point. You just need to figure out what you can add to it to sweeten the deal.
And there's strategies that you can use, and we'll get into this next section here. But let's give you a couple of those strategies that you can incorporate, just like Dean was discussing, Gail was discussing. But the first one we have for you is called the GRIT strategy. And the GRIT strategy is the graduated reduction in tension. So when you have two parties that might be kind of thinking about, I don't know, man, do I really want to change my phone service to switch to another provider? So there's that tension, right? Like the other person's trying to get you to change over your cell phone plan, and you're like, I don't know, mine's working pretty good right now. But then to ease the tension, they're like, well, okay, which provider are you with? Can we, and then once they realize which provider you're with, and they'll know what pricing point you're at, then they'll go into, okay, well, maybe we could offer you that more data. Maybe we could buy the contract over so you don't have to worry about it. Maybe they're looking at your phone. Maybe they're saying, hey, maybe we'll give you a free phone and give you the new, the latest iPhone or Samsung phone. So there's so many ways that they can ease that tension. And what you're trying to do is really say, okay, well, hey, I understand that you're in a contract. Let me buy it out. And technology companies do this. And there's so many other companies that will use the similar type of easing the tension techniques, right? Hey, you know what? Maybe a 2-for-1 coupon, right? Maybe it's too expensive to buy one, but let's get you to at least try what we have to sell you. And so, again, coupons are a great way to ease the tension. Maybe I give you a discount off your first shipment, right? And I say, hey, you know what? Just try the service. Let me ease you into it by offering you something that's amazing, that's really going to make you feel good about working with me.
There's even some scenarios where you don't even have to actually give anything. Like pizza companies do it all the time. They say it'll be there in 20 minutes or it's free. So if they meet that expectation, it doesn't cost them a dime. They don't have to add anything to it. It's just that guarantee that's going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to buy my pizza from there because I'm really hungry and I want it in 20 minutes. And so someone will buy it from there versus the other place that takes an hour to get your pizza to you. So there's so many different ways that you can kind of incorporate these into your sales practices. Yeah, that's takes us right into our next one here, which is another strategy. And this one is taking advantage of log rolling. Now, I'm sure most of you don't know what log rolling means, so I'm going to go through it with you. Log rolling is the process of making beneficial trades across issues based on an understanding of each other's preferences. And this is where understanding your customer, understanding what's important to them, once again, it ties right back in. And this is where you can exchange basically values and concessions in order to make the contract or make the deal perfect for that person or that organization. A good example of that is if you have as a logistics provider like we are, you negotiate with a customer who needs more flexible delivery windows, but is looking for lower shipping costs. So by opening up that availability and say, okay, if I don't have to have it, say here on a certain day, that gives me the flexibility to position my trucks and find, different shipments as they kind of come into that area, and I can navigate them down for that pickup. And it gives a little bit more flexibility. Whereas if you have firm pickup and delivery dates, now you are maybe forced to send trucks in empty from long distances, which costs fuel and hours for your drivers. So there's all these different types of concessions that you can start to build off of in order to make it work for both parties. And that's the whole episode, is trying to figure out what's going to make it work for me and for you.
I think the difference between like log rolling and other strategies is in log rolling is typically a trade-off. You're giving, you're getting something and giving something at the same time. So it's there's a trade-off when it comes to this strategy.
Exactly. It's that give and take. And I think that's the most important part, is that knowing when you go into these negotiations, you might not get everything you are looking for. You may have to make some concessions. And I'll say it quite honestly, most negotiations, you're going to make some concessions, but also with the understanding that so will the customer. But you have to know how to market it in a way that they're willing to make them. And if you aren't able to have that transparent conversation and have that relationship already built, sometimes it's really hard to get a customer to say, yeah, okay, I'll just change this up a little bit in order to make it work for you, because we really want to make this partnership work. So it's building that relationship and then using that in your negotiation to build off and make the deal.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's really, really important not to just focus on the transaction. When you're sitting down with your customer, there's a definite need that they want. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sat down to negotiate with you. And understanding what that need is half the battle, because if they're trying to get something from you, which is going to help with their service or their product, you have to be able to deliver that. And sometimes, like we were talking about, there's ways around some of these, perceived non-negotiables, and it's showing the willingness to cooperate. Because again, we talked about setting the stage. This is the start of hopefully a long-term relationship. I know, Dan, you've had customers from day one. You set the stage during the right negotiation, and now 15, 16 years later, they're still your partner because they remember, like, everything. Everyone remembers that first impression. That's why they say you can only have one.
And so let's talk about that. Like, I want to challenge that. Can it be about the transaction? And typically that's where it starts, right? Because everything starts from a transaction point. And, something that we see and experience in trucking is, the price, right? Like sometimes it's that price negotiation. A lot of businesses, you're going to have that price negotiation. And for us, it's like, okay, well, do we focus on the single transaction or the long term? And so we always say, okay, well, if you want this price, so again, the give and take is, if you want this price, I can give it to you, but I want a long-term commitment. I'm not in it for just the one haul, right? The one transaction. And so, again, it can start off as a transaction. A lot of things do, but again, it's what do we do from that point? And then it's, again, how do you build that for me, it's always about how do I build that long-term relationship?
Yeah, and I think that there are also things that we can do when it comes to perceived obstacles as well. Like when we go into so many negotiations, there's people that have these hard, I'm not wiggling on this, I need this in order to make this deal to come into fruition. So we go into it with those expectations, but I would say probably 9 times out of 10, there is always room to negotiate and there's always room to wiggle. It's just how you kind of portray those conversations and walk forward from there. We see it quite often when it comes to, like, for example, produce companies. They may deal with a lot of issues when it comes to spoilage when moving their freight because of temperature issues, because of, long transit times. And because we have those issues when it comes to those types of customers, we can sometimes negotiate. Maybe if they say, your price is too high. Well, it's like, okay, what is it costing you in the long term when you're having to say every 20 load or 1 out of 20 loads, you have to do quite a large claim on because half the load spoils before it reaches its destination and it doesn't even make it to the grocery stores. So what would it mean to you if we could go in and we could reduce that, 1 out of 20 shipments to 1 out of 100 so that majority of your product is making it to the stores, is being sold, and then you get to, you get the profits and you have that actual tangible gain for that increase in price for your freight cost. So there are so many ways to go back and do it. And I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea on how you're going to go ahead and expand into it and go into these negotiations knowing that there's going to be wiggle room on almost every area of that negotiation.
Yeah, and I think it's a really cool opportunity to not only learn more about your customer, but their business, because there might be some issues like you were just dealing with that they might have not even considered or realize there's people out there to help alleviate some of these costs, which would be a huge pain point for them. So don't be afraid to try new ideas, introduce new terms like the ones, when Damon was talking about, if you're negotiating, sometimes, in transportation, there's a spot rate for like this one move that just has to move. Can you pick it up tomorrow? But, and they're looking for a different rate. But if you understand it's something that is, doable and it's something that satisfies your needs, provided there's volume involved and you can secure something rather than just looking for one, next thing you know, they're negotiating into this partnership with a new carrier that is in business with you for a decade and a half already. So every opportunity to sit down with your customer is not just an opportunity to learn more about them, but an opportunity to solidify that relationship. But before I get to our conclusion, I was just wondering, Gil, did you have anything else to add?
I don't have anything specific to add, but I wanted to let everyone know we got another worksheet for you. So if you go ahead and open that up, you'll find several questions. We actually purposely didn't go over any of the questions today because it's going to test your listening skills a little bit. So if you were paying attention, you should be able to answer the first 2 questions. And then as you get into the final couple, these are more for you to actually try drafting these negotiations out and conceptualizing different methods and what you would do in certain situations. What are some perceived obstacles that you could potentially face in your negotiations? So go through it, test your skills, see where you're at. Ask us if you have any questions too. We're definitely here for you. If you are like, I don't know how to answer this question, or I don't know for my specific business, what potential negotiation strategy might be, we're here to help. So definitely reach out if you have any questions or if you're struggling to finish the worksheet.
Right on. And Damon, anything else to add?
I'm good, Dean, but I do hope you're getting value out of this and we could keep providing more value. And your feedback is so much more important for us that we could cater the content for what you're looking for. And because we have so much exposure to so many different industries, definitely want to share that information with you guys.
Yeah, beautiful. So hopefully now you're starting to grab some of these pearls, these little nuggets of knowledge that are going to help you negotiate mutually beneficial terms with your next customer or your employer, if that's the case. And now one of my favorite topics when we move on throughout this segment will be building strong relationships. So next week, we'll be discussing building trust and having open communication, which are two huge skills to have when you're able to set the tone for a long partnership with your customer or your employer. So we hope you enjoyed today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Pizza's here in 20.